Chapter 1. A working lunch leads to a journey of enlightenment. It was a normal day, nothing out of the ordinary. Barbara Ehrenreich had met up with Louis Lapham, the editor of Harper's Magazine, to talk about work. They were enjoying lunch, chatting about article ideas, when everything suddenly changed. Somehow, the conversation moved toward the topic of poverty and how people living on low wages managed to make ends meet. Ehrenreich innocently mused that someone should go undercover and try it for themselves to see how it really works. Of course, she didn't mean it literally, and she didn't mean herself. Yet Lapham's face went from passive to enthralled. It was decided that Ehrenreich's next task would be to go undercover in the world of low-paid labor within the USA. Many people living in the U.S. struggle to pay their bills and eat every month due to low wages and high cost of living. Ehrenreich didn't come from a rich family background, but she wasn't poor either. Her father was a copper miner, as many of her ancestors were. She felt that she was privileged to earn a living as a writer. However, she had a pull towards finding out whether someone with a low-income job, perhaps a single mother trying to pay rent, juggle childcare payments, and everything else that life throws at her, could actually survive and live a life resembling some kind of joy. Chapter 2. An impossible task? It was 1998 when Ehrenreich decided to take on this project. At the time, the National Coalition for the Homeless estimated that for someone to rent a one-bedroom apartment, they would need to have an hourly wage of $8.89. Given that the average hourly rate was far below that at the time, things didn't look good. In addition, the Preamble Center for Public Police estimated that a citizen on welfare had odds of 97 to 1 of landing a job which actually paid this high hourly rate. To rent a one-bedroom apartment and afford food, most people need to earn more than the average hourly rate. To make the project work, Ehrenreich decided that she would need some rules. She vowed not to use any of the skills that she had developed from her own educational background, and that she would take the job offered to her with the highest rate. She would do her very best to keep hold of the job, and she would take the cheapest type of accommodation she could find, as long as it was safe and private. Unsurprisingly, as the project wore on, some of these rules were modified or broken completely in order to stay afloat. Did you know the average cost of living for a single person in New York City per year, excluding rent, is $13,200? Chapter 3. Housing Problems in Florida. For convenience sake, Ehrenreich decided to begin her project in the closest spot to her home. She traveled to Key West, Florida, a destination with a population of around 25,000 people. She was initially worried that she would be recognized by someone she knew, perhaps traveling for a short vacation, but that never happened. However, she found that her name was actually quickly replaced by others, including baby, honey, and girl. It seems that losing your identity is a common and easy occurrence in the world of low-paid work. She realized that to make ends meet to average amounts, she would need to earn $7 per hour. This was assuming that she could find somewhere to stay for around $500 per month. This proved difficult. She quickly found out that her rent bracket only allowed her to stay in trailer parks or very low-quality apartments. The first one she viewed was a trailer with no air conditioning, no fan, no TV, and no screens. This was $675 per month. She ended up taking a room 30 miles away from Key West in order to meet her $500 per month allocated amount. It wasn't ideal, but it was safe and clean. Even the most basic accommodations, such as a trailer, cost an average of $500 per month, and that was in 1998. The traveling back to Key West every day did cause problems later on in the project, however, thanks to time constraints and high gas prices. Chapter 4. One job isn't enough to make ends meet in Key West. With accommodation secured, Ehrenreich started to look for work. She quickly realized that to find a job with a decent hourly rate, she would have to apply to a huge amount of vacancies and attend interviews that were nothing more than surveys and tick boxes. What you don't necessarily realize when you start selling your time by the hour is that what you're really selling is your life. Barbara Ehrenreich. She tried Wendy's with an hourly rate of $6 per hour, Winn-Dixie with the same hourly rate, before finally deciding to take a job at a hotel, Hearthside, which paid a lowly $2.43 per hour, but had tips she could keep for herself. She decided that this might actually work out more over a month. Working as a server, she quickly found that she had to be extremely nice to all customers, regardless of how they spoke to her, in order to earn tips. She quickly bonded with the other staff in the hotel, although the management was a problem. Underqualified and inexperienced, the management seemed to watch every move the staff made. However, this only forced the staff further together, helping to create fun working relationships. Poor management can easily erode employee morale, affecting health and well-being. Issues were never resolved at staff meetings. Morale was low, and she quickly found out that her coworkers were struggling even more than she was. For the first 3 months of working at the hearthside, the health insurance plan wasn't valid, meaning that initially, all staff had to fund their healthcare costs. One of her coworkers, Gail, was fine until she ran out of her estrogen tablets. As a result, she had to spend money she didn't really have on tablets to treat the painful migraines she was suffering from, which wouldn't have been an issue had she been receiving the prescription for her estrogen tablets. Many workers go without essential healthcare because their health insurance is either invalid or they can't afford it themselves. Another coworker spoke about her boyfriend who had recently lost his job as a roofer. He cut his foot badly and had to take time off because he couldn't afford to pay for the antibiotics he needed. He was fired. All of this made her realize that she needed to get a second job to make ends meet. So for the rest of her time in Florida, she worked 8 a.m. until 2 p.m. at a restaurant called Jerry's, and then dashed over to the hearthside and worked until 10 p.m. She was exhausted. In the end, infighting, poor management, and sheer tiredness pushed her to her limits and she walked out. Did you know? In 2020, the U.S. minimum wage is $7.25 per hour. Chapter 5. Yet more housing problems in Maine. The second leg of Ehrenreich's journey took her to Maine. She chose Maine because as a white, blue-eyed, and blonde-haired woman, she thought she stood more chance of obtaining a job with a better hourly rate. Basing herself in the Portland area, she quickly began to look for somewhere to stay, but this proved to be just as troublesome as it did in Key West. She scoured the newspapers and internet, and there were no apartments in Portland within her budget bracket. She could find many condos and large apartments for around $1,000, but she was completely priced out. She did, however, find adverts for apartments in Old Orchard Beach, around 30 minutes outside of Portland. When she arrived, she quickly realized why they were empty. Most affordable accommodation is either lacking in privacy, unsafe, or extremely unclean. The standard was terrible, and the owner of one apartment couldn't show her the communal kitchen because someone was sleeping in it. She eventually found a motel that rented rooms out for $120 per week and took that as the best possible option. Did you know? In 2020, the average rent in Portland, Maine is $1,225 per month. It is very hard to find accommodation now around the $500 mark. Chapter 6. Working her fingers to the bone for very little thanks. History seemed to be repeating itself in Maine as she found the search for work just as soul-destroying as in Key West. After interviews at Wal-Mart and many other restaurants and stores, she was offered a job in a nursing home on the weekends, working for $7 per hour. However, they tell her if she doesn't show up for one day, her hourly rate falls to $6 as punishment. She takes the job but looks for work during the week too, eventually taking a role as a cleaner with the maids. Many employers dock wages or lower hourly rates for small infringements, causing a culture of fear amongst workers. At first, everything seems to be going well, but she soon understands the concept of sheer exhaustion. She has to do a huge amount of training for the cleaning role, and standards are extremely high for very little pay. She meets her coworkers and once again bonds with them through adversity. One of her coworkers, Pauline, owns her home, but she sleeps on the sofa in the living room every night as her grown children and grandchildren fill up the bedroom spaces. Once more, she realizes that in order to live a life of joy in the USA, you need to be blessed. Working so hard in such a physical role quickly causes her skin to flare up, and Ehrenreich and her coworkers start to take more painkillers to cope with the physical pain. This isn't alleviated when she receives her first paycheck for her first job, and then fails to receive one from her cleaning role. She learns that new employees have their first paycheck withheld to stop them from quitting. A series of stressful events and problems with coworkers once again push Ehrenreich too far, and she leaves Portland. Did you know around 13 million U.S. workers have more than one job? Chapter 7. Drug testing takes away your dignity. Ehrenreich's third and final stop is Minnesota. By this time, she was ready for something calmer, something a little less high impact. Her experience was almost exactly the same as it had been in both Key West and Portland. The difference with Minnesota is that jobs pay an average of around $8 per hour, and it is possible to find accommodation, if you're lucky, for around $400 in some cases. The one thing which immediately stands out to Ehrenreich, however, is that drug testing seems to be the mandatory and very dignity-stealing aspect of finding a job. As with roles she went for in Florida and Maine, she's forced to take urine drug tests for any role she applies for in Minnesota. She finds it extremely degrading. My guess is that the indignities impose on so many low-wage workers, the drug tests, the constant surveillance, being reamed out by managers, are part of what keeps wages low. If you're made to feel unworthy enough, you may come to think that what you're paid is what you are actually worth. Barbara Ehrenreich. She's offered a job at Menards, but they question the hourly rate and they expect her to work 11-hour shifts. She refuses and ends up working at Wal-Mart. Many low-paid jobs expect employees to work long shifts for lower than average wages. Once again, the daily grind, constant surveillance, stresses, and poor management take their toll, and Ehrenreich is pleased to come to an end of her undercover journey. Chapter 8. Low-paid jobs are physically demanding. Throughout the project, Ehrenreich comes to the conclusion that every single low-paid job demands more than it's worth. For instance, there are specific skills required. There is a level of physical fitness that most people are unable to keep up over the long term, and the stresses of the daily grind inevitably take their toll. Low-paid jobs require an extreme level of physical fitness over the long term. There's a mindset that low-paid jobs are easy, simply because they demand lower wages. But Ehrenreich finds that to be extremely far from the mark. Even though she was proud of herself for having obtained work and stuck at it, she realized that low-paid jobs do not require zero skills. Every job requires the use of technology, tools, training, and communication/people skills. Each role also comes with its own hierarchy, which has to be adhered to, causing stress along the way. Low-paid jobs require large amounts of training in workplace computer systems, procedures, and all require high-quality communication skills. Chapter 9. The USA's Big Rent Issue. Without a doubt, the most recurring issue from the entire journey is rent. Many people falsely assume that getting a job is a one-way ticket out of poverty, but it's not. You can be as thrifty as you like with most things in life, but rent swallows up most of your paycheck, leaving you with very little left. The biggest expense every single month is rent. This often swallows up a huge amount of a worker's paycheck. The only place where she managed to find any semblance of balance was in Portland, but that was only because she was working 7 days per week, and she didn't have time for anything else. The housing market in the U.S. is a losing game for those who are on a low income. Wealthy people can always outbid a poor person, and they then go on to replace those lower-cost apartments with high-priced condos and golf courses. There's nothing left for those who are on a lower income as a result. Higher-paid employees are able to outbid low-paid workers every single time. As a result, many are forced into poor-quality accommodations, which they struggle to find. The housing problem isn't reflected in the official poverty rate either. This has sat at a relatively okay 13% for many years, but this is only because housing issues aren't included within it. The wages that you earn simply don't cover everything you need to live your life comfortably or even in a healthy manner. As a result, many poor people in the USA are living a nightmare. The official poverty rate in the U.S. does not take into account the high rent issue, therefore failing to reflect the situation accurately. Chapter 10. Low-income workers are caught in a trap. There's a common thought that if you want to earn money, you simply get a job. It sounds easy, but it's not. For instance, if someone is very unhappy in their job, they're not earning enough money, and they're being watched for every move they make. They should leave, shouldn't they? It's not possible. Many people on low income don't have a car, making it difficult to get around. They may have children and need to get home to the babysitter or struggle to pick them up from daycare. In addition, the price of gas is very high. All of this leaves those on a low income stuck, caught in a trap where they either have to stay where they are and try to make it work or jump into even more poverty. Many low-paid workers are unable to leave a job which is affecting their health or to find a higher-paid role. Travel is an issue as well as childcare. The prevalence of drug testing and poor quality management is also extremely demeaning. Low-paid workers are usually too scared to stand up for themselves or speak out, and they're punished without warning or even fired. In fact, the AFL-CIO states that around 10,000 U.S. workers are fired every single day, simply for taking part in a union event. Of course, they're not allowed to fire them by law, so another reason is created. All of this does nothing but make low-paid workers feel like failures, less of themselves and worth nothing. When you're constantly reminded of this, it's impossible to break free. I grew up hearing over and over to the point of tedium that hard work was the secret of success. Work hard and you'll get ahead, or it's hard work that got us where we are. No one ever said that you could work hard, harder even than you ever thought possible, and still find yourself sinking ever deeper into poverty and debt. Barbara Ehrenreich. Conclusion. It's easy to assume that those on low wages struggling and needing government assistance are simply lazy and not working hard enough. However, Ehrenreich's undercover mission shows us that this is certainly not the case. There's a huge discord between what it costs to live your life and how much people are earning. No matter how hard low-paid employees work, it's never going to be enough. They're not lazy, they're far from it. Often working more than one job just to make their rent and food bill for the month. The cost of rent, gas, food, medical care. These are all things which are out of reach for many low-paid workers. Who said that life was good in the U.S.? Try this. Number 1. Work out how much your rent is per month. Then add all your other monthly outgoings on top. What is the final amount? Are you making ends meet every month, or are you falling short of the mark? Number 2. To open your eyes to the rent problem in the USA, look on the internet or in newspapers at the average rate for a standard one-bedroom apartment. It will surprise you. Number 3. Rather than assuming that your neighbor or the single mom down the street isn't working hard enough, perhaps try understanding that life isn't giving them a great deal. Offer understanding and help rather than judgment.